Look, Tim Walz's record is a joke. He's been one of the most far-left radicals in the entire United States government at any level. But I think that what Tim Walz's selection says is that Kamala Harris has bent the knee to the far left of her party, which is what she always does.
Tim Walz is wonderful. She had many good choices among the 6 and certainly among the 2. I'm a big fan of Governor Shapiro. Tim Walz, I know very well. He served in the House. To characterize him as left is so unreal. It's just not what the question. He's right down the middle. He's a Heartland of America Democrat. And he was the chair of our Veterans Affairs Committee. And I don't want anybody to forget that, because he made tremendous, tremendous gains for our veterans. 25 years in the National Guard, longest serving non-commissioned officer ever served in the Congress of the United States. So he brings the security credential, he brings the rural credential, and he will do well in Moral America. Really, it's mystifying to me to see someone that I worked with, shall we say, right down the middle, characterized on the left in this regard.
Let us begin with Governor Walz's crowning achievement, allowing entire neighborhoods and a police precinct in his own state to be burned straight to the ground during the riots in the summer of 2020. And he sat by and he did nothing, absolutely nothing, for days and days. On the first night of the violent riots, Tim Walz, he did nothing. On the second night of the riots, the violent riots, what did he do? Nothing. On the third night, after a Target was ransacked, a police precinct was burned to the ground, Tim Walz did nothing. The left-wing mayor of Minneapolis was begging Governor Walz to send in the National Guard. Walz refused.
To her credit, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz do make an interesting team, because if we remember the rioting in the summer of 2020, Tim Walz was the guy who let rioters burn down Minneapolis, and then Kamala Harris was the one who bailed the rioters out of jail. So there's an interesting team in that sense.
And as if that wasn't enough, you guys should know that Kamala Harris has found a running mate that would support her goal of opening our borders completely. South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley described the Harris-Walz ticket as a win for open borders, socialism, and Iran. RNC Chairman Michael Whatley echoed this statement and said that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are 2 open borders, weak on crime, defund the police liberals who make up the most radical far-left ticket in the history of our country. So here's what Tim Walz had to say about Donald Trump's plan to prevent illegal immigrants from entering the United States a few years ago.
A plan that's out there, talking about it with folks, knowing that he's not going to do anything. He talks about this wall. I always say, let me know how high it is. If it's 25 feet, then I'll invest in the 30-foot ladder factory. That's not how you stop this.
And that's the biggest sign that somebody is very far to the left. When they're all for opening our borders to illegal immigrants that refuse to go through the proper mediums to get inside our country. And this is what many critics of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are now saying. Harris has had one job as the vice president of the United States: to figure out what's happening in other countries and bottleneck the influx of illegal aliens into the United States. Something that could become much worse if they win this coming November. Now, while some analysts are optimistic about this pairing, some liberals are actually aware of how bad of a mix this is. And you know that things are bad when even CNN is talking about it.
Do you think it was a little risky, though, Van, that she didn't go with Shapiro to kind of lock down Pennsylvania? I mean, yes, David Challenger was saying earlier, just because you pick him as your running mate doesn't mean you automatically win Pennsylvania. But I got to think it would have helped just a little bit.
Hey, listen, the conservatives, the right wing, the Republicans, they were chewing their fingernails down to the knuckle because they were afraid of a Josh Shapiro. They were afraid of a Mark Kelly. They're not as afraid of this new governor because they think they can define him. So here's the challenge you've got in this party. And you know, people don't want to talk about it. We got to talk about it. On the one hand, you have a lot of young people who are concerned about Gaza. You have a lot of Muslims and Arabs and others. They have not felt seen by the Biden administration. You start hearing that genocide joke, that was building. And so those folks needed to have a candidate that they could feel comfortable with. This helps them in that regard. But you also have anti-Semitism that has gotten marbled into this party. You can be for the Palestinians without being an anti-Jewish bigot, but there are some anti-Jewish bigots out there. And there's some disquiet now, and there has to be, how much of what just happened is caving into some of these darker parts in the party. So that's going to have to get worked out. It's going to have to get talked.
And guys, that was CNN. And many people believe that Kamala Harris would have had a better shot at Pennsylvania with Shapiro, but she ended up choosing Tim Walz as he resembles her political outlook. But of course, his image will change from today to election day. He's going to be portrayed as a moderate, even though we know he's a radical leftist, as proven by everything that I've shown you so far. But liberal media is already working to dispel this notion that they're starting with Nancy Pelosi. The same tactic is being used for Kamala Harris because they want us to forget the fact that she was the border czar. With this ticket, the message for Republicans is loud and clear. They want to continue what Harris has done. And the same could be said for what President Joe Biden has done, and this is to allow more illegal aliens into the country. And here's something that many are worried about right now. Tim Walz might actually be coming in to save Harris from the media. Since she was handpicked as the replacement for President Joe Biden, Harris has yet to do any interviews where she's actually asked questions. It's like her campaign is actively trying to avoid a situation where the vice president would be forced to give her opinions about possible policies that she'll put into place as president. Now, we know that Donald Trump has been open to questions from the media. And the same could be said for JD Vance. We've already seen that. And it's Vance that's now calling on the news outlets to do something because she is the Democratic presidential nominee. It would be a disservice to the American people if the VP wasn't asked to answer any policy questions until November of this year.
I'm making a number of public appearances over the next few days just to drive home the fact that Kamala Harris's policy have been such a failure for normal Americans. I know the president's very busy over the next few days. One of the things you've got to do is, of course, get out there and speak to people and speak to reporters. A final thing that you have to do, of course, is raise the resources, and I know the president's very busy doing exactly that. So he and I are taking a divide and conquer strategy to this campaign. Sometimes we obviously do events together, but I think we're going to use the fact that we have two people who can both get out there and prosecute a message. We're going to hit the road, but I really want to make just one final observation. I know most of you. I like all of you as people, or at least I like the ones of you that I know. I think that you guys have got to do a better job at actually forcing Kamala Harris to answer questions. This is a person who's been the presumptive Democrat nominee for 16 days. She hasn't taken a single real question from a reporter. The American people deserve to get to know the people who want to lead them, and I think it's shameful for Kamala Harris, but increasingly for the media, that she's taking a basement strategy of running from reporters instead of getting in front of them, answering tough questions about her record, and letting the American people know who she is. President Trump and I take hostile questions, we take non-hostile questions, we get out there and talk to people because we respect the American people enough to want to persuade them and not to try to run from them.
Now, I have an idea as to what the vice president might be running from. Her record as a prosecutor in California. Now, I did a previous video where I covered the story of a young black man who was convicted by Harris, a man who turned out to be innocent. And as it turns out, evidence was planted against him. Do you think that Kamala Harris will answer any questions related to this case? So anyway, make sure you guys check that video out because it is a serious eye-opener. Before I go, thanks so much for liking the video. Thank you for sharing this video and subscribing to the channel. I'll see you on the next one.